Business Development and Sales Manager for NCBA CLUSA, and we're thrilled to have you join us today for our post-impact webinar, Driving Sales Through Product Training and Technology. I will be today's moderator, and your webinar today is co-hosted by Sphere One and BlueVolt. Prepare for Impact was our exclusive webinar series that explored key challenges central to business operations for purchasing co-ops. In the lead up to our Impact Conference that recently took place, October 4th through the 6th, we were using the webinars as a preparation for our workshop discussions. So with the conference now complete, our pivot here is really how we use these webinars to build upon the discussions that we had at Impact. As most of you know on the line, engaging members is definitely a critical part of managing a successful co-op, and one way to do this is by offering your members the opportunity to boost their bottom line. I think everybody that runs a business knows that that's important. So one way to do this is through product training, and we're going to learn how to do that today from Sphere One through their partnership with BlueVolt. They're going to walk you through that, what it did for their members, and in the process, how it transformed their cooperative. So before we begin, just a quick bit of housekeeping for everyone. Phone lines at this point are muted during the presentation to reduce background noise. There will be chances to pose questions, just not verbally. You'll see you have a GoToWebinar control panel on your screen and the opportunity to post questions. You just do that on the question box there down at the bottom. This presentation is going to last between 25 and 30 minutes, so we should get to the Q&A portion of this pretty quickly. We are recording this program. It will be archived on the NCBA CLUSA website. You will receive an email tomorrow containing a link to the posted recording, and please feel free to share it again, listen to it again, and just use it for your reference or anybody else that you think would be beneficial for to have access to it. So once again, our panelists today, Rob Moe, SVP at Sphere One, and Brandon Maskew, Senior Customer Success Manager for BlueVolt. Rob is a great guy. He recently chaired our planning committee for the Impact Conference. He's a 32-year veteran of the construction, supply, design, build, manufacture, and distribution communities. As the SVP of Sphere One, Rob is responsible for member and preferred supplier development, relations and management, negotiations, expanding education, which is what we're talking about here, and just the development of best practices overall. Brandon is a Senior Customer Success Manager at BlueVolt, as I mentioned. He joined BlueVolt in 2012 and really specializes in strengthening BlueVolt's relationships with key accounts like Sphere One. And he's also been instrumental in providing information and education and just, illuminating all the great possibilities about education to our cooperative members and as an association as well. So very pleased to have Brandon on the line joining us today. And with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Brandon to kind of kick this thing off. And as I mentioned, we'll get to some questions later in the program. So Brandon?
Yeah, Brian, thanks for the introduction. Really appreciate setting up some time that we can discuss this, and looking forward to the next half hour. So the agenda for today, as we dive into driving productivity and sales and purchasing through product training, is to look at the BlueVolt and Sphere One partnership, what we've done together, not only historically, but recently. Also show you all some data that we've pulled amongst our community of learners within our system from the co-op communities. Look at some qualitative data as well. I think it's important to look at quantitative and qualitative data as you do put together an education program. And then finally, kind of the end of the formula, what it all means, and an example that we can show there, and then obviously some time for Q&A. So historically, the Sphere One BlueVolt partnership opened in 2008. It's really, we host a portal that allows suppliers to connect with their member base through product education. BlueVolt helps support Sphere 1 through outreach to suppliers, as well as providing member engagement activities both during the year, but especially at the Sphere 1 annual conference. So it's important to really look historically, and I use, and I'll bring Rob in just a second, but I think and it's important to look at the early years, the formation of the Sphere 1 university that we host, to look at, as you look at really driving productivity and purchasing and sales and analyzing what it means to your business, I think you've got to establish that baseline first. You've got to know where you are, so that way you know where the gaps are and where you need to grow. So as we look over a 6-year period, about 300 courses, about 80,000 completions, and about 1,500 unique users. So again, a good foundation to build. And the Sphere 1 executive team, as they launched with us, had a plan in place, and they knew what they wanted to do. But I think really the growth area, and this is where I'll bring in Rob to get some feedback, because the timeline and how I presented the timelines here are very measured and intentional, in that Rob came on board to Sphere 1 in 2015, and we'll look at some of the data. But Rob, maybe look at, as you came on board and you saw Sphere 1 University as this tool to help engage suppliers and members, where did you see it when you started, and what were those first few areas that you knew you needed to tackle in order to help it grow?
Well, some of the first things that we looked at, and I'm assuming, can you hear me? Everybody can hear me? Brandon?
Yes.
Okay,
we
good.
got you.
All right, good. I just wanted to make sure. One of the first things that we recognized was, while our university was doing, I think, pretty well, we had a couple of years where it was suffering a little bit, because the content really wasn't changing that much from our suppliers. Our suppliers really weren't motivated to bring in new content, and really they were having problems seeing the value of the university. And they were then, the primary contacts that we had were having a difficult time going back to their bosses, if you will, to get them to release funds for more content and things like that. Because the one interesting thing about training, which I know we'll get to later, is for a supplier, and even a member for that matter, it's tough to see the benefits of training that's taken by these learners. It's tough to see the results of them, and it's tough to quantify those results. So you have to kind of drill down into it a little bit deeper. So what we did with our members is we just made it more intentional. We spoke with them about utilizing the university. We spoke with our suppliers about building more content. And then we partnered with BlueVolt for creative ideas as to what they were doing with other universities, for other type cooperatives or associations that they were a part of, to just find out what some of those best practices were. And then really we got started. And as I think you could see from these numbers here, our university has pretty much exploded over the last 2.5 years. The members are starting to see a lot more of the value of it, and they're seeing it in their bottom line with what they're capturing in sales and purchase values, ultimately rebates. And I think our suppliers are saying that they can capture that and see that as well. So it's worked very, very well for us, but you have to first develop the mind share, in my opinion, as a cooperative, what you want to accomplish with your university or with your training program, and then you need to foster those ideals out to your membership and suppliership.
Yeah, and I think one thing that we continue to go back on are kind of the 3 C's as you roll something like this out. One, you've got to have content. If you don't have content, then the platform is flat. You've got to have a communication plan, and at least a success plan. You know, what are the metrics that we're looking at in order to track success? Do we want to drive sales? If that's too aspirational right now, do we just want to create engagement? Just simply get courses in and get the members taking courses. And the third one, the most important one, and this is where Rob really came in, has been instrumental in our strategic partnership, is you've got to have a champion. You've got to have somebody say, and own it and go, listen, I know this is going to be successful. It's been successful in other places. And so if I champion this program and drive the messaging from the top down, both my suppliers and my members will latch on to that. So Rob, from your perspective, how important has it been, and what sort of feedback have you gotten from members and suppliers to you as far as being the champion of this program?
Well, I think everybody appreciates kind of a point of the sword, so to speak, and everybody appreciates that champion, that person that's willing to organize things, that person that's willing to put the best foot forward, even when sometimes they don't understand why they're stepping in that direction. And I think that our members at the distributor level, and just for those that might not realize what Sphere One is, we're a construction supply cooperative. So our members are calling on end users that are building anything from houses to bridges to high rises, you name it. And so our members are selling everything from power tools to safety items to fasteners, you name it. And their salespeople probably have a book of SKUs that could be anywhere from 3,000 to 5,000 different types of products. So a salesperson has a lot of different directions that they can go in. So from the training side of things, the more that you can focus or help show a membership that you care about what it is that their people are learning about, it's all based on that premise that they'll sell more of what they need. I think from the supplier side, they appreciate that champion because, again, for them, it's all about how they're able to keep score with the revenue that they're capturing. And Sphere One University, with all the content that we have, it doesn't come for free. Suppliers have to develop content. They have to be willing to partner and utilize the tools that they already have, in more cases than not, to be able to work with someone like a BlueVolt to build these things into what is now Sphere One University. So I think both sides of that fence, the membership and the suppliership, appreciate the fact that someone or a group of someone's, if you will, is leading the process and has a willingness to offer up accountability for that process.
Great, thanks, Rob. So to get there, as we've seen kind of historically, kind of where we were, where we've been, and certainly, as Rob would probably agree, we still have a long way to go. A lot more growth and a lot of positive momentum to continue to grow. And again, this is all in support of a supplier and a member base that needs to stay engaged to drive sales, drive productivity, and drive engagement. But to get there, we need to study the folks that have logged onto our system, and we utilize Sphere One as well as 3 other co-ops that we work with to really study and say, let's talk to the people that actually log on and consume training to figure out what drives them to learn, what habits do they have. So some things that we found, and again, we commissioned a study about a year ago with a third party here in Portland, Oregon. We surveyed about 1,500 distributor learners, so folks that work in distribution that recommend and sell the supplier products. And it gave us some illuminating data. 90% of those agree that after they finish an online course, they feel like they're more suited to sell that product and more knowledgeable. So first, what we're trying to track is that first step or that first phase. Sales competency. Does providing product training at least create that awareness and create that knowledge level? The next is around productivity. So we asked this question a few different times. In my branch or in my office or amongst my sales staff, if I'm the only one that's completed an e-learning course or an online course, my coworkers rely on me to be the product expert. You know, on one hand, 44% may look low. It looks less than 50%. But if you think about it this way, if you're a member and you have five salespeople, if 2 of those 5 become product experts, then you've increased the knowledge level of your sales staff. So you're going to have a staff that's better suited to recommend product when customers come in the door. And then the last piece is, not just the last piece, but another piece we looked at is understanding changing demographics, today's e-learner, the folks that like to learn and learn on their own, and integrate that learning into their workday, their preference of environment and how they like to learn. We found that predominantly folks like to get online to learn about products. Lunch and Learns, while still is valuable, the platforms that we provide certainly augment the face-to-face activities that suppliers are conducting with the folks that sell their product. We found that consuming training online helps drive that engagement. And the last one here that I'll highlight, knowledge retention. So 56% of the folks we talked to prefer knowledge checks, and I think this was one of the most important pieces of data that we found. So what knowledge checks are in a product training module is, if it's 10 minutes long, 5 minutes into that, they're going to be checked to make sure that they're staying engaged. It may ask them a series of questions to make sure they're retaining information. What this told us is folks that subscribe to and have built a practice around consuming learning and e-learning want to be checked for knowledge. They don't simply want to press play, go to the water cooler, come back when the video's over and pass the quiz because they already know everything they need to know about the product. This says, no, you know what? Halfway through that course, do check to make sure that I'm engaged. And again, this tells us that, and it can tell the supplier that, no, these folks really do care about learning. So, Rob, anything else kind of to add there before I jump into some of the qualitative information?
No, I think you're right on target. I would continue on with that. I don't want to disrupt you. You're on a roll.
So there's two sides of the coin. One, there's data, right? And the numbers mean a lot. And there's the quantitative information, but there's also the how. Like, I really want to do this. I really want to implement this. You know, I'm a co-op. I don't have really a true learning platform to drive education from my supplier or vendor network all the way through to the members. I've seen the data. I really want to do it. I get it, but how do I do it? How do I get started? There's a lot of ways to do that. And these are some of the high-level, more organizational strategies that we found that have worked. And I'll tell you, my role at BlueVolt, not only working with Sphere 1, but I work with 12 to 14 other co-ops and buying groups. So this is me synthesizing a couple thousand conversations during the year at member conferences. So I know this information doesn't come from us. This comes from the folks that are trying to drive training at a 2-branch to a 25-branch distributor. One, you have to have executive buy-in and cheerleading. And I think this not only goes back to the key stakeholder at a member, but this also goes to a stakeholder at a co-op. If you're a president of a co-op and you want to drive a program like this, it's got to be bought in from the executive level. Rob did a perfect job of illustrating what happens when an executive at a co-op starts to drive this and some of the success that comes from it. I think secondly, you have to formalize it. And I can keep that a little subjective in that formalizing something can mean a lot of different things. We've seen it formalized in performance reviews, meaning at the end of the year, you have to complete so much training in order to put in for a raise or a job promotion. I've had other folks tell me, you know what, we're 2 branches. We don't do performance reviews. It just doesn't fit with our culture. Well, that's fine. You can still formalize it. You can still have team huddles every other week where you talk about training. You can talk about the newest product that you put on your shelves and what that means from a sales perspective, and also what the training module that was supplied by that supplier meant to helping sell the product. Third is shrink their world. What we mean by this is some of the data that I showed. I mean, Sphere 1 University has gone from a nice, concise bundle of a couple hundred courses to now it's getting to where we're pushing 500 product training courses. And so if you have executive buy-in and you've got a champion driving the program, the next piece is make it meaningful. So you might not need your people to take all 400 or 500 courses. You might need to lead them in a direction of those 8 or 10 products or those 8 or 10 services that are meaningful to you and your business. And I think it's important that you shrink their world and give them the training that's meaningful to what they do and who they come in contact with on a daily basis. Peer-to-peer influencers and champions. This we found has been most impactful. Having an executive champion is great. But if you hand off something like this to maybe you're one of your newest salespeople and say, hey, I want you to become a product expert on the bandsaw market or the power tool market that we sell. And we sell DeWalt and Milwaukee and Makita tools. And here's 20 courses for you to take. And when you're done with those, I want you to report back and present back to the business what you learned and what it's going to mean for our company, whether it's 2 branches, 20 branches, 1 home office. And this is where it becomes really important as an executive, because as an executive, you've set the standard, you've set up the program, and then you're allowing it to grow organically within the organization. Organic growth amongst your employee base will be golden and will be nirvana. And then you'll be able to step back and really understand the impact that it has when you start to engage. When you walk in I've had a customer tell me that they would go in the back warehouse and they'll have their warehouse people, they'll overhear their warehouse people talking about the newest product training that they took. And to that it's gold. Our platform is heavy on incentives. We have a built-in incentive tool called BlueBucks where learners can earn dollars for completing courses and redeem them for gift cards. But it goes beyond that. Generational changes in today's workforce, folks that are consuming training. There's a couple ideas to look at it. There's the compliance and safety portion of training, which you kind of need to have to stay certified, to stay relevant. There's the other piece, which are incentives. We found that incentives work, whether it's a built-in tool like BlueBucks that BlueVolt has, or whether it's other incentives. We found a few dollars can go a long way. An example of that would be maybe a supplier's just released 5 courses and you've got 6 to 7 branches. You want to create competition and then provide incentive around it. Whether it's a paid lunch, whether it's tickets to a ball game, or whether it's a half day or 2 hours, you get to go home on a Friday 2 hours early. We found that incentives can go a long way to driving a successful training program. One of the other pieces is holding your suppliers accountable. I'm going to pause again because I want to bring Rob back in on this. It can't go understated that in order for this to be successful, the members of the organization need to be trained. They have a thirst for knowledge. They continue to bring in new employees that have no idea about what they're getting into. They're not knowledgeable and educated on the industry, but they need the content. So, Rob, talk to me a little bit about the importance. I mean, the numbers showed it, and you mentioned it, but I kind of really want to hammer this home about the importance of holding your preferred suppliers accountable.
Well, I think the big thing that it does is in holding the suppliers accountable, you first have to talk with them about what they have to offer as it relates to education and ultimately training content. And by holding them accountable, it's really not as much holding them accountable as it is providing them opportunities to use many of the additives they already have for training or for education to help stimulate growth in your cooperative. And so what I did, and it was kind of, I don't want to say easy, but coming from the supplier side for, a long time before I came, we're a part of this cooperative, and we saw the value of what education represented for us and our sales growth year in and year out. And I think that the accountability that the sales leaders from your respective suppliers, what they pass down to their field sales team is grow your business, you're forecasting, you're doing all those things. I think showing your suppliers how training and education can help to foster growth and relationships with the member sales forces matters. And so by holding them accountable, it's really first showing them the value and what it means. And then secondly, the accountability aspect is just once they do it, or if they're one of the few that aren't doing it, you know, really kind of showing them where they do or they don't fit into the total process of what you're trying to accomplish as an organization, as a cooperative. And I think we used to have about 50% of our suppliers that participated. We'd love for 100%, but our numbers are consistently growing. And I think now we're close to 70% of our suppliers provide us content. And so for those that don't, I go back and share with them, hey, listen, you're one of the few. You're one of the third, if you will, or the 30% that are not a part of it. And your sales might not be growing, or purchase values might not be growing as well as they could if you were to do a nicer job with training the employees. And I think it works. So it's kind of a crawl, walk, run scenario. You got to show them, and then you got to tell them a little bit, and then you got to engage them in order for it to work.
Great, thanks. Oh. And I think that leads directly into the next slide that, Rob, I'm going to have you kind of highlight, that says, what does it all mean, right? If I do invest time, if I champion a program behind this, I've seen what it can do from a anecdotal data, I've got best practices, but at the end of the day, how am I going to show value? How am I going to show value to not only members, but have that value seen by the suppliers as well? So I know we've worked strategically with Rob and his team around giving them some of the learning data and how that matches up with purchasing volume. I think is a really impactful slide. So Rob, if you don't mind going through this a little bit, just to kind of show us what you found.
Well, what we did is a couple of years ago, going back to what I said a little bit ago, members and suppliers weren't really sure of the obvious values of training and education. So what we did is I drilled down to it that much further. And basically those 4 bars that you see are broken out with, there's 20 members on that first bar that didn't have not one module taken by any of their employees in 2016. And of those 20 members, 79% of them, their purchase values with their suppliers went backwards, didn't grow or went backwards in 2016. You'll see that 11% grew 1 to 9% and 10%, grew 10% or more. You see that as the bars go down, those members whose employees took 1 to 50 modules, the bar starts to flip. Only 20% of those 25 members had purchase values that didn't grow. The third bar, 51 to 249 modules taken by their employees, 41 members were represented in that bar, only 9% of them, their business didn't grow. You can see how absorbently then the lighter green gets bigger, but then the brighter green gets even that much bigger. And when you get to the bottom, it's those members that took 250 or more modules, their employees took 250 or more modules. That represented 55 of our members, which is a little more than a third of our membership. Only 8% of them had purchase values in 2016 overall that didn't grow. And I think what this tells our members and our suppliers, training works, because I don't think there's any distributor or any member of a co-op that ever just puts things into inventory for the sake of putting it into inventory in times like today. They're buying things and they're purchasing things because they're selling things. And so this is a very compelling scenario. We showed this 2 years ago with our numbers from 15. We showed it last year with our numbers from 16, which is represented in this slide. And we'll do it again with our members for 2017. And it makes sense. And these aren't industry trends. These are specific co-op trends for Sphere 1 and all the suppliers that are a part of it. And it's amazing that what it does, because these numbers do not lie.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think, you know, one of the constant feedback we get is one on the, you know, from a member base is, oh, I don't have time to put my people through training. And Rob, I think that this helps highlight, not only do you have time to put people through training, is if you invest time to train your people, you're going to sell more product.
Well, and I think that's a great point, Brandon, and it's something that I heard a long time ago from a distributor that I've had the privilege of knowing for 30 years. He's actually one of our largest members in Sphere 1, and he had talked about training. He was probably one of those catalyst owners back in the day that just drove education through his team. And I was talking with him one time. He actually presented at a STAFTA convention, which is a large association convention that we happen to be a part of, our members and suppliers as well. He spoke a few years ago as the STAFTA president and said, when I started to talk with our ownership about, you know, our company just investing the money in training and training and training, the owners, the people that I worked for said, well, you know what, we're going to train them, and what's going to happen is somebody's going to come and steal them from us. They're going to take them from us because they're so smart and they're doing so well. And this guy came back to his ownership and he said, yeah, but if we don't train them, they're going to stay. And I think that's a very compelling scenario. You don't want the people that aren't doing anything. You want the people that are sought after, because it tells you got the best people on your bus. And if you're doing the things as a company that are good for those employees, well, they want to stay there. You know, so if you're not training them, they don't have the knowledge, they're going to end up staying, and they're going to actually be a shortcoming for you.
Yep, absolutely. I appreciate it. That's all we have for today. Again, I wanted to keep it to a half hour. We preach suppliers creating short, concise, efficient content. So wanted to make sure that we stayed efficient today. Brian, so I guess I'll kick it back to you to see if there's any questions. I will say Brian does have this PowerPoint slide, so happy to share it with anyone. Also, with the study that we did, I know I only highlighted, I think, 4 or 5 data elements. There's more. So if anyone out there wants to do more of a deep dive behind the study that we did, please reach out to me. Be more than happy to schedule that call. But Brian, I'll kick it back to you.
Sure, and thank you guys for this. You know, I've heard this, you know, in a few different versions, and the first time I heard it, it was striking. You know, the comparisons that Rob was putting out there, and it, you know, that slide is super powerful. And I have a question. I'll come back to it, but you know, from NCBA's point of view, you know, the training, you know, needs to happen across the board. You know, we had a best practices session at our recent Impact event, and the moderator of that, Jack Bailey, was, you know, talking about, and he may have said it publicly or it might have been behind the scenes, but you know, his thought was that everybody needs to be, you know, thinking of themselves as a technology company. And I think what he was getting at with that is more about innovation. And, you know, from NCBA's side, we look at innovation, you know, in this space, in this conversation, as education and helping people continue to evolve, you know, their business. So, you know, we look at things like this, you know, and what BlueVolt does and how Sphere 1 took advantage of it. You know, how can we apply that across the board? And so that's, you know, for me, that's been a very valuable thing to see. So, you know, I appreciate that. And I think it's, you know, as NCBA continues, you know, forward as, you know, the primary voice for all co-ops, you know, this is the work that's being done in the purchasing sector is really important. So, you know, thank you to Brandon and Rob for, you know, kind of being the catalyst to that discussion. So I guess the question that I have, I've got a couple here, and we'll turn it over to the audience as they come in. But, you know, I think, Rob, you mentioned, you know, we don't have the time. Some folks will say we don't have the time to do this. Getting people to that point where saying, okay, we do have the time involves a culture change. You know, do you have any experience with Sphere 1 sort of process, instituting that culture change and maybe the struggles that you encountered, and then once sort of the ball got rolling, how it picked up steam?
I think the big thing that we did, so I've been with Sphere One now going on 3 years. I think the first year we heard from a lot of people on the member side of things that it was a timing issue, or our most experienced salespeople, they know everything. They feel like they know everything. And I think once we went ahead and started showing them the dollars and cents that were coming from people that were using the platform, I think that started to resonate with those distributor members to not take no for an answer and start building into what their expectations were of their employees through their bonus structures and things like that. We probably have a third of our members that use some of their rebate value every year to incentivize their employees, from the purchasing people to the counter people to the warehouse people to the outside sales people, to utilize Sphere One University. And it's one of the benchmarks as a part of their performance to go ahead and use the university. And they have to take X number of modules a year. And if they don't take those modules, then they can't or won't capture as much bonus as they potentially could get. So I think for those of you that are going to hear that, well, they don't have the time, show them the value in dollars of if they don't spend the time. Because if they don't spend the time, they have no idea what they legitimately can capture. So I think that's probably the first thing to do, and that's what we did, and I think we were pretty successful in doing so.
Cool, and that kind of brings me to my second question. Of the folks that took those 250 plus courses, and 8% of them didn't grow, do you have any sense about why, for whatever reason, it didn't work for them when the other folks saw so much growth? Was it management? Was it the region? I mean, any insight to that, why training didn't work for some reason?
Well, there's anomalies in anything. I think, that first bar that we showed, it was those members that didn't take any of the modules and didn't do what they could have done. Obviously, that was pretty compelling, but when you look at the last bar, I think is what you went to. The call broke up a little bit. I didn't hear you. There's probably anomalies in there. There's probably reasons for it. Our biggest distributor member with the most locations, with the most people to train, they took probably close to 4,000 modules. They were one of the couple that didn't grow in 2016. It was by a fraction of a couple of percent, but they didn't grow. The year that they had in 2015, they knocked it out of the park. But in 2016, they actually went a little bit backwards. So I think some of it's regional trends. I think it's construction market. I think there's anomalies in there. Who are they partnering with as far as which suppliers? What did they take advantage of the year prior versus the current year? I mean, yeah, there's a lot of things that add into the equation. So I know that probably only answers a portion of the question, but it's the best answer I got without making something up.
No, and I think it's important because, I think the common sense is that if the more you know about a product, the better you're able to talk about it, and that, your sales will grow the more knowledgeable you are. So, that's great. We have a question here. What percentage of Sphere One's online training, product training, let me back up. What percentage of Sphere One's online training is product training versus soft skill training? And are they having any success with soft skill training, if so, if it's being done?
So soft skill training is something that we're networking through right now with our membership to find out what type of training they want as it pertains to soft skills. So there's 100% of the courses that we have online through Sphere One University that BlueVolt helps us to manage is all product-oriented training from our suppliers. But we'll be looking to partner with BlueVolt in 2018 to add more soft skill type scenarios. But to this point, we have none. It's all product informational training from our suppliers.
And Brian, we do have an integration with a partner company that provides soft skills training. I will say that there are two or three other co-ops, one NCBA co-op that did implement soft skills training at the beginning of this year. to help augment the product training that they offered, and they immediately saw an uptick because then for the smaller members or the members that don't have a huge training budget, the value to be able to provide professional development, soft skills training, along with product training, there's your onboarding program for any new sort of employee. So I think diversifying content is really important, and we're starting to have more and more of those types of conversations.
Yeah, I mean that's a big part of the sales cycle. I think a question here coming in about incentivization. Are all of the trainings incentivized with Blue Bucks, or could Sphere One do something unique to their co-op, or how does that work?
Everything that. No, go ahead, Brandon. Go ahead. Sorry about that.
No, you first. You go first.
Everything that we have from our suppliers has some type of an affixed incentive to it. It could be anywhere from $1 to as much as $10 per module, and a lot of it's based on content. A lot of it's based on what a supplier wants to get the message out, and how they want to get the message out, and how quickly. We actually had a supplier last year that launched a new product category that consisted of around 15 to 20 modules, and that was new and innovative to the industry, specifically to the construction industry. And they put a $10 bogey on every one of those modules. And they, I don't know how many thousands and thousands of dollars that supplier specifically spent, but it was a home run with our members. Our members bought a tremendous amount of the product, so much in fact that I think some of the products are still on back order. So yeah, again, kudos to that supplier for incentivizing the members. But to answer your question, every module that we have up carries some kind of an incentive for the distributor's learner.
Yeah, to help highlight that example, so they doubled their incentive. So 2x, they spent 2x on incentive dollars, and their usage or the number of eyeballs on those courses was 6 to 8x of what they typically get on their content. So from an ROI perspective, it played out. We did some follow-up with that supplier, and they saw it as a home run. Yeah.
Now, the other side of that equation, incentives, is really, what kind of marketing is involved to, develop those incentives, communicate those incentives. Who kind of does that? Is it, a BlueVolt thing? Is it a co-op thing? And then, how does that really factor into the question that a lot of groups are on a budget? So, how do they navigate some of these questions if they're going to say, yeah, we want to commit to training, can we afford it? How do we even communicate it? So it's sort of a multi-layered question there, but I'll open that up to either Rob or Brandon.
Well, first of all, go ahead, Brandon. You go first this time.
Yeah, I would say that we hear that a lot as we bring on new groups that are a streamlined staff that say, hey, we really want to do this, but we need help. BlueVolt, we see ourselves as a subject matter expert in driving training through a channel using this type of a model. So our support with our co-op partners runs the scale from tactical calling programs, best practices, because you have to remember, we're not only partnered with Sphere One on the industrial side, but we're partnered with 12, 14, 16 other groups. So we're really able to mine the industry and mine our partners for best practices and use those best practices to help inform folks like Rob and Carol and their team on how to drive it. And then we provide full support behind it, whether it's email programs, best practice sheets, calling programs to reach out to suppliers around content best practices, and then supporting them face-to-face at any conference that they have and any opportunity to help drive awareness and engagement.
Yeah, and to that point, I mean, BlueVolt has done a fantastic job of supporting us and develop the portal of our website that houses our university. Because keep in mind, if you were to do a university, you want to provide something for your members, learners, to be able to go on. You help them design a password, a login, because everything's password and login protected. And they come into that site. BlueVolt has actually helped us over the last couple of years. They're doing something really cool and innovative for us right now that is updating everything that is germane to that portal to our university. So when you go in, it scrolls through the new modules from the suppliers or the most seen modules, the most used modules, and gives them kind of, a perspective. If you're a brand new user or learner, it kind of channels you through some things. We're also working with BlueVolt because we have distributors that reside, members, if you will, that reside in really a few different buckets. They reside in the power tool and fastener bucket, or the air tool and fastener bucket, or the concrete product and accessory buckets. So what we've done is we bundled those particular modules that fit into those respective buckets. So if you're a distributor that resides in concrete products and accessories, you click on the concrete truck on our website under Sphere 1U, and there's all the modules that are germane to what should be your employees. Same thing holds true for power tools and fasteners, etc. So it's how do we get the word out? Whenever a supplier comes up with a new module, we make sure that our members know about it through an email blast. We put it in our first of the month updates. We are continuously letting them know that there's new content. And then again, when someone goes into our university, all the newest modules are right there for them to go ahead and capture. And it's at zero cost to the distributors that are part of the co-op. This is all something that the management team does internally. And we would certainly be more than willing to share with any co-ops that want to navigate more into this process. We would love to share with you some of the best practices that we do internally. It doesn't take a lot of time. It may take some time to set up, but once it's set up, it's pretty simple. And BlueVolt's an excellent partner for helping you to do so.
Awesome. And then, Rob, this is a question for you, if you're able to answer. What percentage of distributors buy is coming through Sphere 1?
So what percentage? Okay, so to make sure I understand that, so what percentage of our members' spend actually comes through?
Correct.
About 65 to 75%. And we can be pretty accurate with that because we survey our members every year. It's, I don't want to say a requirement that they answer the survey, but Carol and I hold their rebate checks if they don't answer the annual survey. So yeah, it's kind of a requirement, but we ask our members to tell us what their spend is in roughly 150 fine line categories. And some of those categories have suppliers in them, or they don't, and we're working to find suppliers for those categories. But our members tell us what the spend is in that given category, as well as the 3 suppliers that they're buying from. So we're able to drill it down. And when you take our annual spend in purchase value from our existing suppliers, and you kind of navigate that in or divide that into what our members' overall spend is, it runs about 75% or so. So very, very strong, very strong. We're very proud of it, but hey, there's 25% more to go.
Yeah, and when I think the follow-up question that was asked about that is kind of getting to what you're alluding to there, is that, you know, every group has a strong core that's participating in the co-op programs. And, you know, I think the last slide that you posted speaks to this, but the question is really, has the training been able to get the low-performing members to buy more from the group's suppliers as well?
It definitely does. It definitely does, because, you know, you look at that slide. So these numbers were captured based on using, I think there's 141 members that we went ahead and were able to extrapolate their data to use it. We've got 151 members. The reason why we didn't use all 151 members is some of them came on during 2016, so they had no data to capture in 16 versus what they would have done in 2015 because they weren't a member of Sphere 1. So if you look at these 141 members here in this snapshot, the 20 members that didn't use the university, I'm going to say that probably of those 20, 10 of them are now using university. So I believe that as we navigate through this year, I think what we'll find is there won't be 20 members who didn't use the university. I think the number is going to be more 10 or less, because something that we built into an incentive for our members, we're paying our members now twice a year. We were only paying them once a year. In order to capture 2 payments versus 1, you have to utilize Sphere 1 University, or they have to come to Carol and I with a very compelling argument as to why they're not. So everybody wants their money, and obviously it's their money. We do give it to them, but we're creating incentives, a carrot, to make sure their employees are getting trained. So yeah, I'd say that number is going to go down. I think it's going to go down a lot, quite honestly.
Awesome. Well, it looks like that's all the questions that we have. So I would, just kind of put it back to you guys. If there's anything, in closing that you wanted to say, Brandon or Rob, before we wrap this thing up, I'll leave you the floor now, and then we can get to our official close here.
No, I appreciate the time. I would say that for the folks that we bring on board, I mean, we showed a life cycle of 9 years today for Sphere 1, and there's more years to go. It's certainly something that needs to be planned and phased, but there's a life cycle to it. I think you have to be in constant analyzation of what's driving member growth and adjust. And I think that we've got a pretty good handle on how to help folks do that.
And from the Sphere 1 perspective, we really can't say enough about the folks at BlueVolt and their willingness to help and support. And I think the measure of success for our university and what we've experienced through those 9 years has been, it's been a two-way street, and it's been a great partnership. And we at Sphere 1 appreciate what we have as a partnership with all the co-ops that are a part of NCBA. So if there's anyone on this call that would like to reach out to me, or through Brandon, reach out to me, we'd love to get on the phone with you or share some best practices of some things that we've done to get into more detail, whether you're developing a university or you have one that's kind of languishing a little bit. We might be able to share some things with you that might create a benefit and ultimately help your organization grow. So we're happy to help. And thanks for your time today.
Yeah, and thank you guys. As I mentioned at the top, it's always a pleasure to work with Rob and Brandon. And at NCBA, we've got I think a really interesting 2018 ahead, and how we can apply some of this stuff to benefit our members. So thank you guys for that.
Thanks, Brian.
This webinar has been. Go ahead, Brandon.
No, thank you.
Oh yes, absolutely. I wanted to let everyone know that this webinar has been recorded, and everyone will receive the link for that recording tomorrow. If you're looking for more information about purchasing co-ops or just co-ops in general, you can always email me. My first initial B as in Brian, and then my last name, Munson, M-U-N-S-O-N, @ncba.coop. I'd encourage everybody to subscribe to the Co-op Weekly e-newsletter for information coming out of NCBA, and specifically information on Impact 2018. So stay tuned for that. It's a great way to keep connected. And we'll also be announcing some more purchasing co-op specific things coming up for 2018. And we do have 2 more webinars for you guys planned too in November, so stick around for those. Again, my pleasure today to moderate this webinar and to work with Rob and Brandon on this. Thanks again for your attention, for the audience on the line, and we hope everybody has a great day. Thanks, everyone.